The screen flickers to life, and for a heartbeat, there's silence, then chaos. Metal groans, glass shatters, and alarms scream into the void as a figure rips free from restraints meant to hold something far weaker. This isn't just a soldier, this is something new, something wrong. In that moment, Dr. Elena Voss realizes the truth. Her team didn't just create the perfect weapon. They unleashed something they can't control. Imagine a lab buried so deep underground it doesn't exist on any map. The air hums with tension, thick with the scent of antiseptic and fear. Scientists in white coats huddle around monitors, their faces lit by the glow of day to scrolling too fast to comprehend, and at the center of it all, Subject X9. A clone, a soldier, a living, breathing experiment with reflexes sharper than a razor and strength that defies human limits. They told themselves it was for the greater good. But when those restraints snap like twigs and X9's eyes lock onto the observation window, greater good tastes like ash in their mouths. This isn't just a story about science gone rogue. It's about the moment ambition outruns caution, when the thing you build to protect turns on you. The chase that follows isn't just a fight for survival, it's a reckoning. Every corridor X9 tears through, every security door he crumples like paper, is a question echoing in the dark. What happens when the weapon becomes the hunter? Strap in, because what starts as a breach in a secret facility spirals into something far darker. The kind of truth that doesn't just keep you up at night, it rewrites what you thought was possible. And by the end of this, you'll be asking yourself one terrifying question. Would you have pulled the plug sooner, or were the monsters always the ones holding the scalpel? X9 doesn't run, he hunts. The lab's sterile white walls blur as he moves, not with the clumsy desperation of an escaped test subject, but with the precision of something designed to outmaneuver predators. When the first tranquilizer dart whizzes past his ear, his body reacts before his mind even registers the threat. Genetic memory kicks in. Decades of combat simulations, reflex training, and tactical data flooding his muscles like lightning. The soldiers shouting into their radios don't stand a chance. He reads their movements before they make them, ducking under their aim, using their own hesitation against them. A reinforced steel door blocks his path. The scientists designed it to withstand a bomb blast. X9 tears through it like wet cardboard. The alarms fade behind him as he ascends, level after level, his bare feet leaving smears of blood on the concrete stairs. He doesn't feel the cuts. Pain is just another variable his body calculates and discards. Then suddenly there's no more ceiling, just open sky. Cool wind slams into him, carrying smells his brain can't yet name. Exhaust, rain, the sickly sweetness of rotting food from a dumpster. His pupils dilate, adjusting to the neon glow of the city beyond the fence. For the first time, he hesitates. The lab's AI had simulated urban environments, but this is alive. A siren wails in the distance, his spine stiffens. Instinct screams at him to move. He leaps the fence in a single bound, melting into the maze of alleys beyond. Behind him, the facility's lights flicker like a dying heartbeat. Ahead, the city pulses a beast of concrete and noise, blind to the predator now slithering through its veins. Somewhere in those shadows, X9's fingers curl into fists. They built him to obey, to be a tool, but tools don't taste freedom, and tools don't hunger for answers. The last thing the cameras catch is the glint of his eyes in the dark, then nothing. The hunt isn't over, it's just begun. The city becomes a battlefield under the glare of artificial light. Colonel Riggs' voice crackles through every earpiece in the strike team, sharp as shattered glass. Grid Del to sweep, eyes on thermal, I want him alive. But the unspoken truth hangs heavy in the static. Alive doesn't mean unharmed. Boots pound pavement as armored units fan out through backstreets, rifles scanning every shadow. Above them, helicopter blades churn the air into a frenzy, searchlight beams swinging like pendulums counting down to disaster. Dr. Voss stumbles after Riggs, her tablet clutched to her chest like a shield. "You're treating this like a malfunctioning drone." The words tear from her throat, raw with desperation. X9 isn't just circuitry, he's learning out there. Her mind races with the implications. Every second the clone spends free, neural pathways are rewriting themselves, adapting beyond the lab's careful conditioning. Riggs doesn't even glance back as he thumbs his safety off. Sentience is a luxury, Doctor. That thing's a $20 million asset. The contempt in his voice is colder than the metal pressed against his palm. Meanwhile, 3 blocks east, X9 presses against the brick wall of a laundromat, nostrils flaring as he analyzes the chemical traces in the air: gun oil, adrenaline sweat, the sour tang of fear. His pulse doesn't spike, fear is data. The shouts echoing down the alley aren't threats, they're blueprints mapping the search pattern in his mind. When the first beam of light grazes the dumpster beside him, his muscles coil, then the scream cuts through the night. Not a soldier, a child. The searchlight jerks away as the team pivots toward the sound. X9's head tilts animal quick. Through a second-story window, a little girl points at the chaos below, her stuffed rabbit dangling from one hand. For a fraction of a second, predator and prey lock eyes. Something clicks in the clone's skull. A subroutine the scientists never coded. The rabbit tumbles to the pavement as the girl's mother yanks her away from the glass. When the light swings back, the alley is empty. Only the shredded remains of a hospital gown snagged on a fire escape hint at the path upward toward rooftops, toward vantage. Toward choice, Riggs' comms erupt with overlapping reports of movement on 12th Street. He never thinks to look up. The alley smells of rotting food and engine oil, a narrow canyon of cracked brick where the city's neon glow can't reach. Corporal Hale's breath fogs in the cold air as he signals his team forward, rifle barrels sweeping the darkness. Every shadow feels charged, electric, like the air before a storm. Then a rustle, too fast to be a rat. Hale barely has time to shout before the world tilts. A figure drops from the fire escape like a falling guillotine, landing between them with a thud that cracks pavement. X9's eyes reflect the distant streetlight, twin shards of amber cutting through the dark. The soldiers open fire or try to. A wrist snaps left, disarming Dawson before the safety's off. A spinning kick sends Vega's rifle clattering into the dumpster. Then Hale's own weapon is wrenched upward, his finger still squeezing, bullets chewing holes in the night sky. He expects death, waits for it, but the killing blow never comes. Instead, X9's grip tightens on Hale's collar, hauling him nose to nose with something that shouldn't exist. Up close, the clone's pupils are human, too human. The growl that rips from his throat is half machine, half something older. "I don't want to fight you." The words land like a gut punch, then silence. The weight at Hale's throat vanishes. He crashes to his knees just in time to see X9 move, not running but flowing up the alley walls, limbs twisting in ways that make Hale's bones ache to watch. Vega's cursing, Dawson's clutching his wrist, but all Hale can do is fumble for his radio. The static hisses like a held breath before his voice breaks through. "Sir, he let us live." Across town, Riggs' knuckles whiten around his comm unit. The silence that follows isn't just absence of sound, it's the sound of a paradigm shattering. Because monsters don't show mercy, weapons don't choose, and now, for the first time, the men under Riggs' command are staring at their rifles like they might be pointing them at the wrong enemy. Somewhere above the city, X9 pauses on a rooftop, watching the chaos ripple outward beneath him. His fingers flex. The echoes of gunfire still ring in his skull, but beneath them something new pulses, a hunger for more than survival. They built him to ask how to kill. Now he's asking why, and that's a question no algorithm can answer. Rain drums against the rusted warehouse roof like 1,000 whispering fingers, each drop pulling X9 deeper into the storm inside his skull. The concrete floor is cold beneath his knees, but the real chill comes from the images slicing through his mind, not memories, not his own, yet they burn with the weight of lived truth. A desert sunset, the acrid tang of gunpowder, a laugh cut short by static over a radio, Elias. The name surfaces like a boy in the dark, dragging a flood of sensations with it. His hands know, Elias's hands gripping the steering wheel of a Humvee. The metallic taste of fear when the idea erupted. The last thought before the world went white. Tell my sister, X9 gasps, fingers clawing at his temples as if he could physically rip the visions free. Whose life am I living? The whisper hangs in the damp air, unanswered. For the first time, the lab's conditioning wavers. The scientists grafted Elias's neural patterns onto his mind like a patchwork quilt, stitching together reflexes and muscle memory without considering the threads between them, the grief, the loyalty, the guilt. Now those threads tighten around X9's throat. A shattered mirror leans against the warehouse wall, and the face staring back isn't a weapon's, it's a stranger's. Elias's scar above the eyebrow, his own two perfect teeth, a collage of lives forced into a single body. The programming screams at him to return, to obey, but another voice rises beneath it, raw and human. Run. Not from the soldiers, from the ghosts. Outside, a police siren wails. X9's combat reflexes map the exits instantly, but his feet stay rooted. Something in those stolen memories makes the city feel different now. The alleyways aren't just escape routes, they're places Elias once bought hot dogs. The park across the street, that's where he proposed. The weight of it all should crush him. Instead, it kindles something hotter than defiance, purpose. A crack of thunder shakes the building. In the sudden stillness, X9's fingers uncurl. The decision crystallizes without a single line of code to guide it. They wanted a soldier, they got a man, and men don't fight wars they don't believe in. Somewhere in the lab, Dr. Voss watches the neural readouts spike and stutter on her screen. The numbers don't lie. Conditioning degradation, 87%. She reaches for the emergency protocol switch, then stops. The tremor in her hand isn't fear. It's awe, because the flashing alert isn't a malfunction. It's a heartbeat. The lab's fluorescent lights hum like a dying insect as Dr. Voss stares at the blinking cursor on her screen. The words glare back, accusing. Subject X9 last known coordinates uploaded. Her finger hovers over the enter key, trembling. Behind her, the ghost of Elias's laughter echoes not from the clone's memory banks but from her own. 3 years ago, she'd handed that same man a consent form for the neural mapping procedure. He'd joked about donating his reflexes to science, never imagining they'd be weaponized. Now his ghost lives in a body that's never known sunlight without a muzzle. The coffee in her mug has gone cold, but the burn in her throat has nothing to do with caffeine. She thinks of X9's neural scans, the way his synapses fired when he spared those soldiers. Not a glitch, a choice. Somewhere in that labyrinth of engineered instincts, a man is waking up. And Riggs wants to put him down like a rabid dog. Her thumb stabs the key. The screen flashes transmission complete as the encrypted file rockets into the night, destined for the only reporter reckless enough to chase this story. He deserves a chance, she whispers to the empty lab, as if saying it louder might absolve her. But the security camera's red eye blinks indifferently in the corner. The door crashes open before she can even stand. Riggs fills the frame, his smile a knife twisted in civility. Doctor, the word drips with venom. Behind him, 2 agents already have cuffs ready. Funny thing about firewalls, they can't stop a lieutenant colonel with clearance and a hunch. He steps closer, towing her abandoned coffee cup with his boot. You really thought you'd get away with treason? Voss doesn't flinch. It's not treason to question orders, even you know that. Riggs barks a laugh sharp as gunfire. Save it for the court-martial. He nods to the agents and their grip bites into her arms as they yank her upright. But it's the look on his face that chills her, not anger, not even disgust. Relief, like he's been waiting for an excuse to scrub this project clean. As they drag her past the observation window, Voss catches her reflection, pale, hollow-eyed, and beyond it, the empty containment chamber where X9 once knelt. The ghost of a smile touches her lips. Let Riggs erase the files. Let him burn the lab. The genie's already out of the bottle, and it's wearing the face of a man who's just learned how to say no. The last thing she hears before the elevator doors close is Riggs keying his radio. All units converge on these coordinates. His voice doesn't waver. Live capture authorized. Somewhere in the city, a journalist's phone lights up with a map, and in a rain-soaked alley, X9 lifts his head as if sensing the tide turning. Not hunted, not anymore expected. The stolen phone's cracked screen flickers with the glow of a news broadcast, casting jagged shadows across X9's face as he crouches behind a dumpster. The reporter's voice cuts through the alley's damp quiet, sharp with the kind of outrage that only comes from uncovering something real. Confirmed evidence of Project Prometheus, a clandestine military operation violating international cloning bans, static dances across the footage of lab doors being chained shut, protest signs bobbing like buoys in a sea of furious faces. Then, suddenly, his own face fills the screen, grainy surveillance footage of him vaulting the facility's fence. The caption underneath reads bioweapon or victim. A bottle shatters against pavement nearby, followed by the roar of a distant crowd. The riots have reached the lab's perimeter. X9's fingers tighten around the phone, tendons standing rigid beneath skin that still carries the pale imprint of restraint straps. The reporter keeps talking, words like ethics and war crimes buzzing like flies, but all he hears is the tremor in her voice when she says, "Eyewitnesses describe the subject moving at inhuman speeds. A drop of rain hits the screen, blurring his reflection into something grotesque." For the first time, he sees what they see, not a man, not even a soldier, but a thing that shouldn't exist. His breath fogs the glass. The riots, the headlines, the way the newscaster's throat bobs when she says his designation. None of it is about what he's done. It's about what he is. A garbage truck lumbers past the alley mouth, its headlights sweeping over the brick walls. In that sudden light, X9's pupils contract to vertical slits. Another feature the scientists never bothered to explain. The broadcast switches to a press conference. Riggs stands stiff behind a podium, medals gleaming under studio lights as he intones, "Rest assured, this rogue asset poses no threat to civilians." X9's lips peel back from his teeth in a silent snarl. The lie is so obvious it aches. They designed him to recognize deception, to smell the sour tang of cortisol on a sweating informant, to spot the micro-tremor in a sniper's finger before the shot. Riggs might as well have shouted his real orders into the microphone. "Put it down before the world sees what we made." The phone dies with a pathetic chirp, plunging him back into darkness. Somewhere in the city, a car alarm wails, and the wind carries the acrid sting of tear gas. X9 rises slowly, his joints popping with the eerie precision of machinery. The riots are a distraction. The manhunt is a smokescreen. The truth coils in his gut like a live wire. They're not afraid of what he'll do, they're afraid of what he'll say. Because weapons don't testify, and he remembers everything. The transmission crackles through a stolen police radio, interrupting the static with Riggs' voice calm, measured, wrong. Subject X9, cease hostilities. Present yourself at these coordinates for immediate de-escalation and negotiation. The numbers that follow are for a warehouse district by the river, all abandoned factories and rusted chain link fences. A perfect kill box. X9's fingers flex around the radio, tendons standing rigid. He knows a trap when he hears one, but then Riggs says the word freedom, and for a heartbeat, the warehouse roof beneath him feels unsteady. Wind whips through the shattered windows of his hideout, carrying the scent of oil and river water. The radio sputters again, this time with a burst of overlapping chatter voices meant to be muted. Neural wipe prepped on level 3. The transmission cuts off with a hiss, but the damage is done. X9's jaw clenches. They don't want to negotiate. They want to erase him. Below, the streets teem with riot police and news vans, their floodlights painting the pavement in harsh whites and blues. The broadcast keeps looping Riggs' offer, the coordinates, the lie wrapped in bureaucratic polish. But X9 isn't listening to the words anymore. He's counting the sniper nests on the rooftops opposite the warehouse, noting the black vans idling a block back with their engines running. They've even staged a medical team near the entrance, gurneys ready. Not for treatment, for transport. A moth flutters against the broken bulb above him, drawn to the light even as it burns. X9's lips twist into something too sharp to be a smile. He knows what they expect, the desperate creature lunging at the first hint of mercy. But they forgot one thing. He's not just programmed for combat. He's programmed to adapt. The radio crackles to life again, Riggs' voice fraying at the edges. X9 confirm receipt. Silence stretches. Then, with deliberate slowness, X9 thumbs the transmit button. Just once, a burst of static, the universal language of gotcha. Across the river, Riggs' fist slams onto a control console. He's not buying it. The techs around him freeze, their screens reflecting the colonel's snarl. Switch to Plan B, authorize lethal force. But X9 is already gone, melting into the labyrinth of fire escapes and alleys. They wanted to lure him into a cage. Instead, they've handed him a map of every gun, every exit, every weakness in their net. And now he's the one setting traps. The radio dies with a final sputter. Somewhere in the static, a new signal pulses a different frequency, a different voice. Dr. Voss' last gift bouncing off untraceable servers. If you're hearing this, run. But not just from them, run toward something. The coordinates that follow aren't Riggs' warehouse. They lead to a bunker on the city's edge, an old black site facility abandoned when the funding dried up. A place with answers, a place even Riggs doesn't know about. X9's boots hit the pavement without a sound. The night swallows him whole. The broadcast station's glass doors explode inward in a hail of shrapnel, alarms drowning beneath the primal roar of a man who was never meant to be one. X9 moves like liquid vengeance through the chaos. Security guards slam against walls before their fingers find triggers. Cameras swivel uselessly to track a blur already gone. The air smells of ozone and fear as he follows the tremor in Riggs' voice echoing down hallways, that polished baritone now fraying into something raw. Containment breach in sector. The emergency broadcast cuts to static the second X9's boot kicks the studio door off its hinges. Riggs stands frozen mid-sentence, one hand hovering over the panic button beneath the news desk. The studio lights bleach his face corpse pale, reflecting in the sweat beading above his lip. For the first time, the colonel looks small. X9 takes it in, the trembling producer crouched behind a camera rig. The way Riggs' left eye twitches toward the exit like a cornered animal. He expected drones, gas, not this. A live audience of millions watching their hero's mask slip. You made me to obey, X9 growls, stepping into the spotlight. His voice isn't the monotone the lab recordings captured. It's a live wire crackling with something that makes the cameraman flinch. But you forgot to make me a slave. The words hang in the dead air between them, too human to have come from a weapon. Riggs' fingers inch toward his sidearm, standard issue, polished to a shine he'll never live up to. What happens next isn't combat, it's dissection. X9's hand snaps out, not to strike but to demonstrate. Riggs' wrist bends at an angle biology never intended. The gun clatters to the floor, followed by the colonel's choked gasp. The studio monitors show it all in high definition. The way X9 looms over him, not with the mindless rage of a triggered asset, but the terrifying clarity of a man who's done the math. You're alive for one reason, he murmurs, low enough that only Riggs hears. So you can tell them what happens when they build guards and call them property. The cameras keep rolling as X9 turns toward the exit. No theatrics, no final blow, just the deliberate click of his boots on broken glass a countdown Riggs feels in his marrow. Behind him, the news ticker stutters, then updates in real time. Military clone defies orders, live footage. By the time Riggs finds his voice to scream for backup, the screen door is swinging shut on an empty street. Somewhere in the city, 1,000 phones light up with the same grainy footage. 1,000 thumbs hover over share buttons, and in a bunker on the outskirts, Dr. Voss watches the Colonel's humiliation bloom across the dark web with a smile that tastes like redemption. They thought they'd created the ultimate weapon. They created the ultimate witness. The armored transport's engine howls like a wounded beast as X9 slams the accelerator through the floor, steel-reinforced tires screaming against asphalt. The city gates loom ahead, 10 tons of retractable barricade meant to stop tanks, not whatever this is. Bullets spiderweb the bulletproof glass, harmless as rain, but the real threat comes from the sniper nest above the checkpoint. A .50 caliber round punches through the windshield, missing X9's skull by inches. He doesn't flinch. Flinching is for things that fear death. In the rear view, the rookie's face flickers Private First Class Alvarez, 19 years old, his fingers white-knuckled around his rifle. X9 sees the tremor in his hands, smells the sour tang of panic sweat. He's seen that look before in the mirror of a Humvee in Fallujah. Elias's memory rises unbidden, the weight of a dead squad leader's dog tags in his palm. The transport's metal groans as it rams the barricade, hinges buckling like soda cans. Don't throw your life away for them. X9 snarls, not at the rookie, but at the ghosts crowding his skull. The words carve through the gunfire, too human to be a weapon's last stand. Alvarez freezes, his rifle dips. A heartbeat later, the transport crushes the gate beneath its wheels and the desert swallows them whole. Sand whips against the hull like shotgun pellets as they skid into the wastes. Somewhere behind them, drones whine into the air, but X9's already rerouting power from the compromised engine to the thermal cloaking. The dashboard fizzles, a final spit of sparks before dying. Alvarez stares at the smoking console, then at the man who should have killed him. Why? The word cracks like dry clay. X9 doesn't answer. He's too busy counting the seconds until the drones lose their scent. Too busy listening to the whisper in his veins that says this, not the lab, not the conditioning, is what he was made for. Not to follow orders, to break them. The hatch hisses open, flooding the cabin with the oven blast heat of the dunes. Alvarez flinches when X9 tosses him a canteen. Walk due east, they'll find you by sundown. The private's mouth opens, to protest, to thank him, to ask the question they're both thinking. But X9 is already gone, nothing left but footprints evaporating in the wind. Somewhere to the west, a dust devil spirals into the sky. The drones won't follow him there. The sand eats signals, swallows heat signatures, erases men whole. Perfect hiding place for someone who's already a ghost. Back at the ruins of the gate, Riggs kicks the shattered remains of a security monitor. The footage glitches, replaying those final frames in a loop. X9's eyes locked on Alvarez, not with the cold calculus of a machine, but the weary fury of a man who remembers what it's like to be disposable. The Colonel's calm crackles with frantic updates, no sign of the asset. Search grid's negative, but all Riggs hears is the echo of his own heartbeat, not fear. Not yet. The realization slithers into his gut like a knife. They didn't lose a weapon today. They created a legend, and legends don't stay buried. Sand grits between X9's teeth as he crests the dune, the fabric of his stolen fatigues rasping against sun-blistered skin. The rebel outpost isn't hidden so much as buried, a cluster of shipping containers sunk into the dust like ancient tombs, their metal sides warped by decades of wind. Movement flickers in his peripheral vision. A rifle's iron sight glints from a sniper's nest disguised as a rusted water tower. He could dismantle their defenses in 63 seconds flat. Count the ways, fracture the sniper's collarbone with a thrown stone, sever the alarm wires with a blade of heat-warped glass, breach the main hatch before the sentries finish blinking. But something makes him spread his palms instead, fingers splayed to show no weapon, no threat. The wind carries the click of safeties being thumbed off. Then Elias, the voice cracks like a whip. A figure steps from the shadow of a container, limping slightly, the desert sun carving deep gullies into his face. X9's breath hitches. The man's left sleeve hangs empty, pinned at the elbow, but it's the eyes that trigger the flood memory or mirage, he can't tell. Dust-choked laughter around a campfire, the taste of cheap whiskey from a shared canteen, a hand shoving him clear of an exploding mortar shell, Sergeant Cole. The name falls from X9's lips like a prayer in a dead language. He doesn't remember speaking it, doesn't remember learning it. Cole's good hand trembles as he steps closer, squinting against the glare. You died at Black Ridge, the words are flat, final. Took a round saving my idiot ass. They sent the dog tags home in a velvet box. X9's pulse hammers against his ribs. Somewhere in the static of his borrowed memories, a Humvee burns. The smell of diesel and copper fills his nostrils. Tell my sister, the thought fractures. I'm not him. His voice sounds raw, scraped clean. But I'd remember. For 10 heartbeats, the only sound is the wind hissing through barbed wire. Then Cole holsters his pistol with a grunt. Close enough, he jerks his chin toward the open hatch where curious faces press against the dim light. Welcome home, kid. The rebels part before X9 like a rumor given flesh. Someone mutters ghost in Pashto, another crosses himself, but Cole's grip on his shoulder is solid, anchoring him to the here and now, to the scent of boiled rice and gun oil thick in the air. Inside, the walls are papered with maps and yellowed mission briefs, a shrine to every operation command disavowed. Cole drags a finger across one faded photo, tracing the faces of men long buried. We've been picking through the wreckage since Black Ridge, found the lab's disposal manifests, accident reports. His knuckle taps a file labeled Prometheus thick enough to choke on. Never found you. X9's vision blurs. The memories aren't not his. He sees the lab through Elias's eyes, the cold gleam of scalpels, the way the doctor's voices softened when they lied. You're serving your country. He sees Riggs signing the termination order before the first neural grafts even healed. A child couldn't be older than 12 slides a chipped bowl of stew toward him. The reflection in the broth wavers, Elias's cheekbones, X9's eyes, something else stitching them together. Cole leans in, his whisper rough with tobacco and old pain. They gonna come for you. X9 studies the horizon through a bullet hole in the container wall. The setting sun bleeds across the dunes, painting everything the color of a fresh bruise. Let them. The file folder creaks as Cole flips it open, its pages yellowed with age and redacted into oblivion. But the photo paper clipped to the front needs no translation. Elias in full combat gear, his smile easy, his eyes tired. The kind of tired that comes from seeing too much. X9's fingers twitch, phantom sensations crawling up his arms, yet not his at all. The memory isn't his to claim, but it burns anyway. The weight of a rifle, the sting of sweat in his eyes, the metallic taste of a lie sticking to his tongue. Orders are orders. Cole's calloused finger stabs at a stamped document beneath the photo. They court-martialed him for refusing to fire on a civilian convoy. Called it treason. The words hang in the thick air, each syllable a hammer strike. Bastards shot him at dawn, then scooped his DNA off the morgue slab before the body cooled. X9's vision tunnels. The rebel safehouse walls warp like funhouse mirrors as another man's rage floods his veins. He sees it not as a memory, but as a truth too vicious to ignore. Elias standing in the desert sun, hands empty, staring down a firing squad wearing the same flag he'd bled for. The last thing he'd said wasn't a plea, it was a name, Lena. A glass shatters across the room. X9 doesn't remember gripping the table, but the wood splinters under his palms now, grooves matching the fractures in his skull. The rebels tense, hands drifting toward holsters, but Cole just watches, not with fear but recognition. He's seen this fury before. They cloned his body. X9 growls, the words scraping his throat raw. The photo trembles in his grip, Elias's smile blurring under a drop of something too hot to be sweat. But not his conscience. The file crumples in his fist. Ink bleeds through the paper like old wounds reopening. Big mistake. In the silence that follows, the desert wind howls through the corrugated steel walls, carrying with it the ghost of gunpowder and the sharp, clean scent of justice postponed. Cole exhales through his nose, slow and deliberate, before reaching into his vest. What he slaps onto the table isn't another document. It's a map, and the red circle drawn over a remote military black site isn't just a location. It's a reckoning, because some men inherit their father's watch or their mother's recipe book. X9, he inherited a martyr's unfinished war, and tonight the desert will learn why that's the most dangerous heirloom of all. The desert night hums with the static charge of impending violence as X9 crouches atop the supply depot's rusted water tower, counting the rhythmic footsteps of patrolmen below. The rebels hold their breath in the shadows, 23 men and women with sun-leathered skin and eyes that haven't known hope in years. Their knives are dull. Their rifles have 3 rounds between them, but they have him, and he moves like vengeance given flesh. A flick of his wrist sends a pebble skittering across the compound child's play, except for the precision with which it lands exactly where he intended. The nearest guard stiffens, turns, steps away from his post. That's all the opening they need. The rebels flow through the gap like oil through cracks, silent as the scorpions scuttling under their boots. X9 doesn't follow. He watches from above, calculating trajectories, marking escape routes, imprinting the entire battlefield onto his cortex like a map etched in fire. Chaos erupts in the armory when the first explosive charge detonates, not enough to kill, just enough to deafen and disorient. X9's lips curl as the soldiers stumble, clutching their ears, their training useless against a threat they weren't programmed to expect. He drops into their midst like a falcon diving, his fists finding throats and pressure points with clinical efficiency. Not a single shot fired, not a single life taken. The rebels gape at the crumpled bodies, then at him, their expressions caught between awe and terror. Move, X9 growls, tossing a crate of grenades to a one-armed woman with burn scars curling up her neck. She catches it with her teeth bared in something too fierce to be a smile. The depot's alarms finally wail to life, but it's too late. Their trucks are already loaded with enough firepower to turn the tide of a dozen skirmishes. As the engines roar to life, a lanky rebel with a rat's tail braid slaps X9's shoulder, his grin splitting his face like a cracked desert floor. Guess they should have programmed loyalty into you, eh? The horizon burns orange with approaching headlights reinforcements. Too slow, too late. X9 vaults into the truck bed, his smirk sharp enough to draw blood. They tried. The tires spit gravel as they vanish into the dunes, leaving behind nothing but footprints and a lesson the military won't soon forget. You can engineer the perfect soldier, but you can't engineer obedience to a lie. And X9, he's just getting started. The sky doesn't darken so much as splinter when the drones arrive, their rotors shredding the dawn into 1,000 jagged pieces. Riggs' voice crackles through the comms of every soldier still standing. Not a command, a confession. Burn it all. The rebels scatter like ants under a magnifying glass, but X9 doesn't run. He counts 16 heat signatures streaking toward them at Mach 3. 23 civilians, mostly women and children, frozen in the open, their eyes wide with the kind of terror that precedes thunder. The first missile hits the water tower, reducing it to molten shrapnel. X9's body moves before the shockwave reaches him, muscles fueled by something deeper than adrenaline, Elias's instincts, screaming at him to cover the damn kids. He's a blur of cracked leather and scar tissue as he bodily hurls people toward the bunker, his enhanced strength making corpses out of doors he rips off their hinges. A little girl's sandal slips in the dust. He doesn't think. He throws her into the dark just as the world erupts behind him. The impact lifts him off his feet, slamming him into the earth hard enough to crack ribs, not that he feels it. His nervous system is too busy rerouting around the damage, prioritizing oxygen to his brain as the rubble buries him alive. Concrete grinds against his spine. Dust fills his lungs like wet cement. Somewhere above, the drones circle for another pass, their sensors blind to the heartbeat thundering beneath 5 tons of collapsed barracks. Funny thing about being designed to survive, they never specified what you were meant to survive. X9's fingers twitch in the dark, brushing the cold metal of a rebel's dropped rifle. His vision swims with damage reports: fractured femur, punctured lung, 3rd degree burns along 60% of his dermis, but the pain is just data. Adjustable, optional, the rubble shifts as his cells stitch themselves back together, tendons weaving like spider silk under the ruin of his skin. He doesn't pray. Doesn't scream, he listens. Somewhere above, Riggs' men are sweeping the site, their boots kicking through ash and bone, confident nothing could have lived through that firestorm. They're right, nothing human did. His hand bursts through the wreckage, fingers closing around an ankle before its owner can gasp. The soldier's scream doesn't even have time to echo before X9 is standing, his silhouette outlined in the glow of smoldering wreckage, his breath coming in ragged, impossible gulps. The drones are gone, the bunker's hatch is sealed, and the look on his face isn't fury, it's invitation. Riggs wanted a demonstration of his weapon's resilience. Fine, let him see what happens when it stops pulling punches. Somewhere in the smoke, a radio sputters to life, Riggs' voice tinny with static. Report. X9 crushes it underfoot, the plastic snapping like a wishbone. He's done reporting, now he hunts. Smoke curls from shattered concrete as X9 drags himself forward, his shredded uniform hanging in charred tatters. The taste of blood and burning plastic coats his tongue, but his eyes stay locked on the figure crumpled against a bullet-riddled ambulance doctor. Voss, her lab coat stained rust red, one hand pressed to a wound leaking dark between her fingers. The rebels who dragged her here are already gone, swallowed by the chaos of retreat, leaving only the echo of their boots and the doctor's shallow, rattling breaths. She flinches when his shadow falls over her, not in fear of the monster she helped create, but in shame. I'm sorry, she chokes, her voice frayed raw from smoke. The words come between gasps, each one wet with damage. We never meant for this. Her fingers twitch toward his face, not to examine, to plead. X9 catches her wrist before it makes contact. The movement isn't violent, it's final. Intentions don't matter. His voice is colder than the steel buried in his ribs, colder than the morgue slab where Elias's body lay before they carved him into spare parts. Only consequences. Somewhere overhead, a drone whines on its last battery life, circuits frying as it circles the ruins like a vulture. Voss's breath hitches, her pupils dilating with something worse than pain recognition. She's spent years justifying ethics waivers and midnight experiments, whispering greater good like a prayer. Now, face to face with the living embodiment of her compromise, the lie curdles in her throat. A tremor runs through the ground as another building collapses in the distance. X9 doesn't turn toward the sound. His focus is absolute, dissecting her face the way she once dissected his neural scans. You knew, he murmurs, not an accusation, a verdict. Voss's chin jerks in something too weak to be a nod. The classified files flash behind her eyes, Elias's court-martial papers, the termination order dated before the first clone ever drew breath. Her lips part, but what escapes isn't a defense, it's a name. Lena, his sister, she's in. A cough racks her, blood speckling her teeth, in danger. The shift in X9's posture is microscopic, A twitch in the jaw, a tightening around the eyes. The programming screams at him to prioritize mission parameters, to hunt rigs, to burn it all down. But beneath the conditioning, something older stirs. A memory not of labs or combat drills, but of a woman's laughter on a porch swing, the smell of lilacs in summer air. Tell my sister Voss slumps against the ambulance tire, her energy spent. The keys she presses into his palm are sticky with her blood, the address scratched into the metal with a scalpel's edge. No coordinates, no contingency plans, just a name and a plea wrapped in silence. X9 pockets the keys without looking. The choice settles in his bones, heavier than any order he's ever been given. He turns toward the wreckage where a motorcycle lies half buried under debris, its gas tank miraculously intact. Behind him, Voss's breathing evens out, not healing, just surrender. The engine roars to life beneath his hands, vibrating through muscle and bone. Somewhere to the east, the sun is rising over a city that no longer exists. Somewhere to the north, a woman named Lena pours coffee she won't drink, waiting for a brother who'll never come home. And in the space between those two truths, X9 guns the throttle, leaving behind the ashes of every lie they told him. The desert wind carries the murmurs long before the crowd comes into view, a ragged sea of sunburned faces and makeshift weapons shuffling forward on blistered feet. They've lost homes, families, pieces of themselves to rig scorched earth campaigns. Yet here they stand, drawn not by hope, but by the rumor of something worse, a ghost who walks like a man. X9's boots scuff the dust as he climbs onto the wreckage of an overturned troop carrier, his silhouette backlit by the dying sun. The crowd stills. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. They built me in a lab. The words land like stones in a pond, rippling outward. A woman with a child on her hip clutches her knife tighter. An old rebel missing an ear spits into the dirt, programmed me to follow orders, to obey. X9's fingers flex, the scars along his knuckles gleaming pale against his weathered skin. But orders are just words someone else wrote for you. A teenager in a stolen uniform steps forward, his Adam's apple bobbing. What if we lose? The question hangs in the air, fragile as a moth's wing. X9's smile is a razor's edge. You already have. His gaze sweeps over them, the hollow cheeks, the bandages crusted with old blood, the quiet fury in their eyes. Now you get to choose how you fight back. Something ignites in the crowd. A murmur becomes a shout, becomes a roar as tools and rusted rifles lift toward the sky. The march begins not with a drumbeat, but with the scrape of 100 determined feet. Behind them, the desert swallows the past. Ahead, the lab's floodlights pierce the horizon like prison searchlights. X9 doesn't lead. He walks beside them, one more scarred soul in a tide of broken things. The revolution won't be televised. It'll be carved into the walls of the place that started it all, in handprints and bullet holes and the echoes of a promise. You don't need a lab to make a monster. Just a reason. The lab's perimeter wall shudders under the weight of rebel trucks ramming its blast doors, the screech of buckling metal drowned out by the war cries of 100 voices. Inside, emergency lights bathe the corridors in pulsing crimson as scientists scramble for panic rooms, their sterile world collapsing under the boots of the very people they experimented on. Riggs stands in the control room, his reflection fractured across a dozen cracked monitors, watching the outer barricades disintegrate in real time. His fingers hover over a console labeled X10 Termination Protocol. "Wake it up," he snarls to the trembling technician. The words send a ripple through the room. X10's chamber hisses open, coolant fog spilling across the floor like a spectral tide. The figure that steps out moves with X9's precision, his mirror image muscles flexing under identical scars, but the eyes are wrong, flat, empty, a predator with its cortex severed. Outside, X9 kicks through the ruins of a security checkpoint, his knuckles roar from shattered helmets. The air smells of burning wiring and spilled blood. He's halfway to the central lab when the ceiling explodes downward, concrete raining as X-10 drops into his path. Recognition hits like a gut punch his own face, his own body, stripped of everything that made it his. They collide without a word, fists crack against ribs, knees drive into guts, a whirlwind of identical reflexes clashing in the flickering dark. X-9 ducks a roundhouse kick that could have decapitated a bull, countering with an elbow to X-10's temple. The clone staggers, then smiles, a dead, mechanical twitch of lips that never learned to mean it. "You're me without a soul," X-9 roars, slamming his forehead into X-10's nose. Cartilage crunches, but the clone doesn't flinch, doesn't bleed, just retaliates with a haymaker that sends X-9 skidding across the debris-strewn floor. Somewhere above, rebels pour through the shredded remains of the lab's roof, their victory shouts cut short as they witness the doppelgangers' battle. Every move is mirrored, every counter calculated, but X-9 fights with something X-10 lost in the cloning vat, rage that means something. A grenade detonates in the West Wing, shaking dust from the ceiling. X-10 barely blinks. X-9 uses the distraction to drive a shard of rebar through his twin's thigh. No scream, just the sickening pop of tendons snapping as the clone pivots, trapping X-9 in a chokehold that could crush a steel beam. The world tunnels to the sound of his own vertebrae groaning. Then, a gunshot. X-10's grip slackens. Cole stands in the blown-open doorway, smoke curling from his pistol barrel, his face a mask of horrified awe. Had to be sure which was which, he mutters, eyeing the two bleeding figures. X-9 gasps, shoving the limp clone off him. X-10 twitches on the ground, fingers still curling as if programmed to fight even in death. The rebels close in, their weapons trained on Riggs' final gambit, but the real horror isn't the body at X-9's feet. It's the realization dawning in Cole's eyes as he stares at the rows of identical stasis pods lining the far wall, each one holding another hollowed-out copy waiting to be woken. Riggs' laughter crackles over the intercom, tinny and triumphant. "You really think you're special, you're version 9, we've got spares." The ceiling groans again. Not from explosions, from something moving in the vents above. The sound of X-10's vertebrae snapping echoes through the ruined lab like a door slamming shut on a tomb. For a heartbeat, the chaos around them stills. Rebels freeze mid-step. Gun smoke hangs suspended in the air. Even the flickering emergency lights seem to hold their breath. X-9 crouches over his clone's limp body, his fingers still curled around the corpse's jawline, feeling the last twitch of synthetic tendons under synthetic skin. "Rest now." The words aren't gentle, they're a verdict. Dr. Voss stumbles back, her boot catching on a severed cable. The horror on her face isn't just for the dead clone, it's for the man who killed him. The man she made. X-9 rises, his shadow stretching across the blood-smeared floor to engulf her. He doesn't speak, he doesn't need to. The corpses around them, Riggs soldiers, lab techs, the hollow-eyed X-10 with its neck bent at an impossible angle, are all the argument required. Voss's breath comes in shallow gasps, her mind racing through a decade of justifications. Necessary sacrifices, greater good. The lie tastes like bile now. "You don't understand what's at stake," she whispers, clutching a date to drive to her chest like a rosary. The project, the research, it could save millions. X-9 steps over a shattered monitor, glass crunching underfoot. The rebels part before him, their weapons lowered but their eyes wary. He stops an arm's length from Voss, close enough to see the pulse fluttering in her throat. Close enough to smell the antiseptic and sweat clinging to her lab coat. "You saved nothing." His voice is gravel and gunpowder. "You just made better weapons." Behind them, Cole kicks open the door to the main server bank, his one good arm hauling a rusted fuel canister. The stench of gasoline cuts through the lab's sterile stink. Voss's pupils dilate. "Those are years of work, lives." Her voice cracks. "You can't just." A gunshot rings out. The data drive in her hands explodes in a shower of sparks. Cole blows smoke from his pistol barrel, his grin all teeth. watch us. X9 doesn't flinch at the gunfire. His gaze never leaves Voss's. Somewhere deep in the facility, an alarm begins to wail, the sound of a system realizing it's already dead. This ends today. He turns toward the exit, the rebels falling in behind him like a tide. Burn it all. The last thing Voss sees before the flames swallow the lab isn't the monster she created. It's the man he chose to be, walking away without looking back, leaving her to drown in the heat of her own hubris. Outside, the desert wind carries the first tendrils of smoke into a sky that hasn't known dawn in years. Somewhere to the north, a woman named Lena pours coffee on a porch swing, unaware that the war ended before it ever reached her door, and X9, he just keeps walking. Not toward vengeance, not toward absolution, toward whatever comes next. Voss's fingers fly across the cracked console, its screens flickering like dying fireflies as she bypasses layer after layer of encryption. The lab's mainframe wasn't designed to keep intruders out, it was built to keep the truth in. Blood trickles from her nose, a side effect of the neural scrambler rigs installed, but she doesn't stop. Not when the files unfold like a nightmare. Project Phoenix, not just cloning, replacement. Names scroll past soldiers, activists, journalists, each tagged with a date, a location, a dossier of their descent. The stench of scorched circuitry fills the air as she forces the data through the lab's emergency broadcast array. Outside, the rebels' gunfire has gone silent. X9 stands atop a ruined server stack, the glow of 100 screens painting his scars in shifting hues. The feed in his hands isn't just footage, it's a confession. Riggs' voice, crisp and clinical, explaining how Phase 2 won't stop at soldiers. Why waste resources re-educating the disobedient when we can grow upgrades? The words slice through the smoke-choked air. A child's face flashes on the nearest monitor, Lena's daughter, her school photo marked with a red X. X9's grip cracks the screen's edge. The rebels murmur behind him, their anger a living thing, but it's the stillness in his voice that terrifies. You hear that? He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. The speakers carry his words across every channel, every stolen frequency, every phone left broadcasting in the streets. They don't want soldiers. They want slaves. Somewhere in the capital, a news anchor gapes at a suddenly hijacked teleprompter. In a suburban living room, a teenager's laptop erupts with classified schematics of clone vats disguised as vaccine clinics. The viral tide spreads faster than panic, faster than the authorities can shut it down. Riggs' fist slams the kill switch, but the damage is done. The world isn't watching a rebellion anymore. They're watching a reckoning, and X9, he's already striding toward the exit, not to run, but to invite the storm. Let them come. Let them see what happens when the slaves stop asking for freedom and start taking it. The last monitor alive shows Riggs' face, frozen mid-snarl, as the feed cuts to a single line of text scrolling endlessly across the ruins. You are nowhere. You are everywhere. We are coming. The radio static cracks open like a fault line, and suddenly the battlefield holds its breath. This is Captain Ibarra of the 7th Armored. We are standing down. The words ripple through the dust-choked air, too impossible to be misheard. Repeat, all units cease fire. A dozen helmet cams flicker as soldiers hesitate, their rifle barrels dipping toward the blood-stained earth. The rebels tense, waiting for the trick, but then another voice rasps over the comms, this one from Riggs' own command vehicle. We've seen the files. God help us, we trained with those men. Riggs staggers back from the monitor, his polished facade crumbling like the lab walls around him. That's treason. He roars, but the crack in his voice betrays him. The screens don't lie. They show his own officers lowering their weapons, their faces sick with revelation. One by one, the green dots on the tactical map blink out, not from casualties, but from choice. Then the unthinkable happens. A single dot pulses on the edge of the grid, broadcasting on an unencrypted channel. Ibarra's voice is steady, but the tremor beneath is unmistakable. X9, you hearing this? A beat of silence stretches thin enough to snap. We stand down if you stand with us. The rebels' murmurs swell into a disbelieving roar, but X9 doesn't move. His gaze locks onto rigs across the ruined lab, past the smoking servers and the bodies of clones that never got to choose. The Colonel's sidearm gleams in the firelight as he raises it, not at X9, but at the nearest camera still broadcasting to the world. You're just a tool, Riggs snarls, his finger whitening on the trigger. A malfunctioning, the gun clatters to the floor before the shot fires. X9's grip bending Riggs' wrist back with surgical precision. The Colonel's gasp is lost in the sudden silence as X9 leans in, close enough for the cameras to catch the truth in his eyes. No triumph, no hatred. Just pity, and you're just a man. The words land like a hammer on an anvil, reshaping the room in their echo. Weak, afraid, replaceable. Outside, the rumble of tanks powering down rolls through the valley like thunder. A soldier, just a kid really, peels the Prometheus insignia from his sleeve and grinds it into the dirt with his boot. The gesture spreads silent and viral until the ground is littered with discarded emblems. The war isn't ending, it's waking up, and Riggs, he's already forgotten, his demands fading into the white noise of history. The cameras linger instead on the back of X9's vest as he walks away, the frayed fabric parting to reveal the barcode tattooed over his spine. Not a serial number anymore, a barcode for the history books. Riggs' fingers close around the detonator with the reverence of a priest clutching a sacrament, his knuckles bleaching white under the flickering emergency lights. The smirk twisting his lips isn't victory, it's surrender. If I can't have it, he rasps, thumb hovering over the arming switch. No one does. The warning blares too late, a deafening shriek of self-destruct initiated that drowns even the gunfire. Concrete groans like a dying beast as the first charges detonate deep in the lab's bones. Ceiling panels rain molten shrapnel, searing through the air where Voss stands frozen, her arms still outstretched toward the fleeing scientists. X9 moves faster than thought, his body a blur of scar tissue and resolve. He doesn't shield her alone, he lunges for the cluster of deserters too, the very soldiers who hunted him hours before, now wide-eyed with the animal terror of men realizing they've been pawns all along. His spine bows under the collapsing roof, reinforced musculature shredding as steel beams slam across his shoulders like divine punishment. The world disappears in a hurricane of fire and screaming metal. When the dust settles, the lab is a tomb of twisted rebar and glowing embers, and X9 is its only mourner. He rises from the wreckage slow as a nightmare, his skin blackened where the synthetic dermis has sloughed away, revealing the titanium alloy beneath. The rebels stumble back, not from the burns knitting themselves closed before their eyes, but from the way he looks at them, not with pain, not with rage. With pity, Voss crawls from the debris, her fingers leaving smears of blood and soot on his exposed forearm. "You could have let us die." The words scrape her throat raw. X9 turns his palm upward, catching a single falling ember in his cupped hand. It dies against his alloy bones without a sound. "Then I'd be the weapon you made me." Outside, the dawn breaks over the desert for the first time in years, unfiltered by smog or gun smoke. Somewhere in the light, Riggs' radio crackles to life with panicked voices, not from the ruins but from the capital. The footage has reached the Senate floor, the protests have reached the president's gates, and X9, he walks into the sun without glancing back, his silhouette warped and gleaming, something more and less than human. The rebels whisper as he passes, some call him martyr, some call him monster. He doesn't answer to either anymore. The cell door clangs shut with a finality that echoes through the sterile halls of the military prison. Riggs presses his forehead against the reinforced glass, his breath fogging the surface in uneven bursts. On the other side, a news monitor plays his own downfall on loop, senators denouncing him, generals shredding documents bearing his signature, even his own wife turning away from the cameras with a stranger's disgust. Disavowed scrolls beneath his face like a coroner's tag. Outside, the sunlight feels like a lie. X9 stands on the steps of the courthouse, his silhouette haloed by 1,000 camera flashes. The scars are still there, ridged flesh where the lab's restraints bit deepest, the faint metallic sheen along his knuckles where the synthetic dermis hasn't fully healed, but the muzzle is gone. A child pushes through the crowd, her tiny fist clutching a crumpled sketch of him standing between rebels and soldiers. She doesn't flinch when he kneels to her level. "I was made to serve power," he says, voice carrying over the silent square. Not with the lab's crisp enunciation, but with the rough edges of a man who's learned to speak through broken ribs and fire. The words aren't for the microphones, they're for the girl's wide eyes, for the hollow-cheeked veteran nodding in the third row, for the scientist weeping into her hands at the back. "Now I serve people," a murmur ripples through the crowd, morphing into something louder, something alive, but X9 isn't looking at the cheering masses. His gaze lingers on the prison's high windows where Riggs' shadow trembles behind the glass. There's no gloating in that stare, no vengeance, just the quiet understanding of a man who's tasted both ends of the leash. The Chancellor's podium creaks as she steps forward, her speech about justice and reform already rotting in the air. X9 doesn't stay to hear it. He walks past the flags, past the saluting guards who now wear his face on their protest pins, past the monument they'll carve his name into tomorrow. Let them have their heroes, let them have their closure. Somewhere beyond the city limits, a motorcycle engine roars to life. The desert doesn't care about history. It only cares what you do next. The screen flickers in a dimly lit chamber, casting eerie blue shadows across a face that hasn't seen sunlight in years. Calloused fingers tap against a keyboard, pausing footage of X9 standing victorious on the courthouse steps. The image freezes, zooming in on the barcode exposed across his spine, the mark they all share. A voice, roughened by decades of cigars and whispered orders, cuts through the static. Phase 1 failed. The words land like a coffin sealing shut. Behind him, a vault door groans open, revealing rows upon rows of stasis pods, each one humming to life under the glow of emergency lighting. Inside, figures stir, not the hollow-eyed drones of Riggs' lab, but something sharper. Something hungrier. The camera pans to the first pod's control panel, where a name flickers in crimson letters, X24. The glass fogs as the occupant's breath quickens, their fingers twitching against the restraints. This isn't a clone, it's an upgrade, designed after the first breaches in X9's programming were discovered. No neural grafts, no borrowed memories, just pure, unfiltered purpose, honed by every mistake they made with their predecessor. Across the room, a monitor switches to live news coverage, riots in the capital, soldiers tearing off their insignias, the world waking up to the lie. The figure in the shadows doesn't flinch. "Initiate phase 2, he murmurs, and the phrase slithers into the silence, heavy with implication. The pods hiss in unison, hydraulics whining as their glass lids slide open. Because here's the thing about weapons, when one breaks free, you don't scrap the design, you improve it, and X24, it doesn't just share X9's strength. It knows his weaknesses, knows the way his breath hitches when he hears Elias' name, knows the hesitation in his step when a child's voice calls from a crowd. Somewhere in the desert, X9 guns his motorcycle toward the horizon, the wind carrying the scent of lilacs and unfinished business. He doesn't feel the vibration yet, the seismic shift as 24 pairs of eyes snap open in the dark, pupils dilating in perfect sync. But he will. The makeshift training yard hums with the scrape of steel on whetstones and the low murmur of former soldiers relearning what it means to fight without orders. X9 moves between them like a storm front, correcting a grip here, adjusting a stance there. His touch firm but never harsh. These aren't recruits, they're survivors. Men and women who once wore the same insignia as the ones hunting them now, their uniforms traded for patched fatigues and the hollow-eyed resolve of the betrayed. A knife thunks into a wooden post quivering an inch from the bullseye. The thrower, a grizzled sergeant with a prosthetic leg, grunts in satisfaction until X9 yanks the blade free and flips it in his palm. "Aim's good," he says, tapping the sergeant's temple, "but you're still thinking like they trained you." His own throw doesn't just hit the center, it splits the post down the middle. Splinters rain onto the dust. They expect patterns, predictability. The words land like a challenge, break both. Dr. Voss watches from the shade of a gutted troop carrier, her fingers tracing the schematics of a neural disruptor scavenged from the lab's ruins. "They'll adapt," she calls out. The warning isn't cynical, just weary. She's seen the classified briefings, the cold calculus of generals swapping tactics like chess moves. X9 wipes the sweat from his brow, leaving a streak of dirt across the barcode on his wrist. "Adapting's what I do best." The grin he flashes isn't the lab's programmed charm, it's all teeth, all promise. Voss frowns at the horizon where storm clouds gather over the dead city. They'll send more than soldiers next time. Good. X9 crouches to meet the eyes of a teen clutching a rifle too big for her. He adjusts her grip, his voice dropping low. "Let them send their best. Let them see what happens when the weapons they built start thinking for themselves." The murmur ripples through the yard, a current of something hotter than defiance. Hope. Voss's lips press into a thin line. Strength won't be enough. X9 straightens, his shadow stretching long across the dust. "Good thing I've got a mind of my own." The words linger like the echo of a hammer striking steel, shaping what comes next. Not an army, not a rebellion, a reckoning. The child's fingers are sticky with melted popsicle juice when she tugs on the frayed edge of X9's sleeve, her question hanging in the air between them like the desert heat at high noon. "Are you a hero or a monster?" The words aren't accusatory, just curious, the way children ask why the sky is blue or where lost socks go. Around them, the marketplace buzzes with life, vendors shouting over sizzling meat and the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer. But in this moment, the world narrows to the weight of that question and the scars on X9's knuckles as he kneels, bringing himself eye level with her. Neither. His voice is rougher than he intends, softened only by the ghost of a smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm what happens when you try to control the uncontrollable." The answer isn't poetic. It's not the stuff of bedtime stories or victory parades, but the truth rarely is. Behind them, a mural stretches across the side of a reclaimed government building, painted in bold strokes of red and gold. X9 silhouette standing between a row of soldiers and a crowd of civilians, his arms outstretched, not in surrender but in defiance. The artists gave him a halo because that's what people do with the things they don't understand. They sanctify them or vilify them, but they rarely let them just be. The child's nose wrinkles as she considers his answer, her gaze flicking between the mural and the living, breathing man in front of her. "So, you're like a tornado." This time, the laugh that escapes him is real, close enough. A breeze tousles her hair, carrying the scent of fried dough and diesel fumes, and for the first time, X9 notices the faint barcode tattoo peeking out from under her collar. One of the thousands inked onto the children of former lab techs after the fall, a mark of shame turned badge of resilience. The blacksmith's hammer falls silent. Across the square, a group of veterans pause their card game to watch the exchange, their faces unreadable. They've spent years debating the same question in hushed tones over watered-down beer. Was he their salvation or their damnation, a revolution or a reckoning? The answer, like the man himself, refuses to fit neatly into categories. The child wipes her hands on her overalls, leaving streaks of cherry red. "My teacher says you saved us." X9 plucks a stray thread from her sleeve, a nervous habit left over from another life, another name. "Your teacher's half right." He nods toward the marketplace, where a fruit vendor tosses an extra peach into an old woman's basket, where two former enemies share a cigarette over a chessboard, where the scars of war are slowly becoming the foundations of something new. They saved themselves, I just reminded them they could. The child considers this, then thrusts the remains of her popsicle toward him, an offering, a peace treaty, a tiny act of rebellion against a world that told her monsters don't share dessert. X9 hesitates for only a second before accepting the sticky mess, the ice already melting against his calloused palm. Overhead, a drone hums, not military issue, but one of the hundreds now buzzing between settlements, carrying messages and medicine instead of missiles. The future isn't perfect, it's not even fair, but it's theirs, built by hands that were meant to destroy. And as the child skips away to rejoin her friends, her laughter ringing through the square, X9 allows himself this single, unprogrammed thought: maybe that's enough. The horizon bleeds crimson as dawn claws its way over the city's broken skyline, painting the rubble in hues too vivid for the aftermath of war. X9's boots rest on the ledge of what was once an observation tower, now a skeletal frame of twisted rebar. Below, the liberated stir rebels passing water bottles to surrendered soldiers, children kicking a dented can through the dust, the fragile normalcy of people who have forgotten how to breathe without fear. A gust of wind carries the tinny crackle of a rebel's handheld radio, wedged between reports of food convoys and makeshift hospitals. Then, a fragment of static, a clipped voice buried under interference, movement at grid 7-9er. No ID on thermals, repeat, no ID. The transmission cuts abruptly, as if severed by a blade. X9's fingers trace the rifle stock, the grooves worn smooth from use. Not the lab's sterile prototypes, this one scavenged, modified, his. The morning sun glints off the scope, flashing across the barcode still etched into his wrist. A relic, a receipt, a reminder that nothing ever really ends. Somewhere beyond the ruins, beyond the makeshift barricades where laughter has only just begun to sound genuine, the earth trembles. Not from artillery, from footsteps, too many, too synchronized. He doesn't need the radio's confirmation. The air itself tastes different, sharp, metallic, familiar. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of coolant and gun oil from the east. The lab's ventilation systems used to smell like that, right before the containment units hissed open. A child's balloon escapes its string, bobbing toward the sunrise. X9 tracks its ascent until his gaze lands on the silhouette emerging from the glare, tall, motionless, watching from the crest of a distant dune. Not a scout, a sentinel, the figure doesn't flinch when their eyes meet across the kilometers. It's not hiding, it's waiting. Behind X9, the city stirs unaware. A woman hums as she pins laundry to a makeshift line. Two former enemies share a cigarette over a chessboard. The fragile piece hangs suspended, a held breath. His thumb flicks the rifle's safety off. The click is louder than it should be. Round 2. The words aren't for the rebels, aren't for the ghosts of Elias or Voss or Riggs. They are for the thing on the dune, the thing with his face and none of his scars, the thing that doesn't blink. Some wars don't end, they just change uniforms. And as the first report of gunfire echoes from the east, clean, precise, calculated, X9 steps off the ledge, already running, not toward cover, not toward safety, toward the storm.